Hello, teachers, and welcome to this live stream brought to you on the Teach English Facebook page by the British Council. My name is Marcus James, and in today's live stream, we're going to be looking at ways we can motivate our learners as part of our Teaching Pathways course. And to help me answer some of your questions and to discuss this topic, I have the course tutor, I got that right, course tutor, Chris Thorne. Hi there, Chris. How are you today?
Hello, Marcus, and hello, everyone. I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having us on today.
Most welcome. And teachers watching, so we are broadcasting to the group where participants have been all week discussing the topic, and we're also broadcasting on the Facebook page as well. So Chris, you obviously are moderating the Facebook group where the participants have been all week. What have we been talking about so far in week one?
Okay, so during week one, we've thrown, I think it's about 5 or 6 key questions out to the group, out to the course participants. And I'd really like it if we could discuss some of those and maybe share some of the good suggestions that people have provided. How does that sound, Marcus?
Absolutely. I'm very, very keen to know as well. So teachers watching, do let us know in the comments below. So we'll see we've got quite a few people joining us from around the world already. 200 people watching. Anyway, so do let us know. And we've got viewers in every part of the world already. Chris, I can see Shini in India, Samila in Malaysia, Violetta in Peru. Yes. So what's the first sort of topic of discussion that you've been dealing with in the group?
Okay, well, I think one of the first ones we asked teachers how they could learn what motivates their learners and why that's helpful. Perhaps I could quickly go through some of the suggestions from course participants. I think one of the first people to reply was Kiara, who said that we can learn from observing how learners respond to classroom activities, different learning activities and things they do in the classroom and how much they engage with them. So I think that's a really nice idea, sort of getting people set up, working on things, and then stepping back, giving them space and seeing how they respond to them. Another course participant, Cal Nock, made a sort of similar suggestion, but of a slightly different focus. So she said it's really helpful to make use of informal chatting time. So she might give her students a few minutes at the beginning of class to talk about their hobbies or what they've been up to at home recently. And maybe the teacher could sort of observe and listen into some of those conversations, but rather than focusing on sort of the language that people are using and sort of how they're articulating themselves, really focusing on what they're talking about to, sort of pick up on, their interests and, the various motivations that they might be bringing into the classroom as well. There's one from Victor as well. Now, Victor said he kind of covers these things as well. He says maybe some empirical methods like observation, interviews, but you could even use surveys as well. That could be quite a nice way of doing it. So asking people directly in quite a sort of almost quite a scientific way. My first thought upon reading that was that it might be the teacher giving learners a survey for them to sort of go away and complete individually. But maybe Victor was thinking that could be the basis for a communicative classroom activity. Maybe students could, sort of survey each other about their various reasons for taking their course with you and what they want to be able to do as a result of it. But how about you, Marcus? Have you tried sort of any of these approaches in your classroom?
Well, yes. I mean, to be honest, when it comes to my learners, I'd like to sort of bring up Tolly's comment here. I mean, making competitions. I teach a lot of teenagers and younger learners, sort of primary age students, and they're very competitive by nature. So anything competitive really works as an energizer, gets them motivated. Sometimes they forget they're learning when they're competing with their classmates.
Mm. That's such an important thing, isn't it? Just thinking about the sort of the learner profiles. Some students might come to class and they're highly motivated to sort of learn the subjects. You know, for many of us, that would be English, perhaps with a proficiency exam in mind. So they might have a very specific motivation, whereas a class of 7-year-olds probably aren't going to be thinking like that. So the way we tap into their motivations, as you say, that could be using sort of competition and, you know, enjoyment of the activities. I mean, I think regardless of a class, we should be aiming to really engage people in the activities because they're useful, they can see the benefit for them and they enjoy them, as well as sort of seeing the relevance for them outside of the classroom.
Exactly. And so I'll just bring up this comment from Saha, who mentions showing pictures. And again, I think going back to my students, they love any opportunity to flick through their Instagram feeds or at least talk about some pictures. I mean, if the teacher is choosing some images, what kind of images should we choose in order to motivate our learners, Chris? I mean, I've had sort of two groups. The moment I show a photograph of, let's say, a family dinner, a lot of my students sort of turn off. They don't want to, they're not interested. They've got nothing to say about that. But a photo of, let's say, a travel or a concert or a festival, and then they're off on one.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Sort of thinking about topics and the topics that our learners are particularly interested in. I mean, going back to your original question about what sort of pictures should the teacher select, I might spin that question around. I'm not sure if that's cheating a little bit, Marcus, but maybe the teacher could spin it around and put it on the students. So maybe give the students some kind of prompt and ask them to either sort of go away and bring back some images to look at in the next class, because that creates a real communicative purpose. It creates something for the learners to talk about that they'll probably be very curious about and very interested in talking about, as to why did you choose that picture to represent free time or meal times or what have you. So I think, if as much as possible, if rather than the teacher dictating what people look at different points in the lesson, if a teacher can prompt learners to maybe bring in or generate that content themselves, then that can be really motivating. And yeah, give learners a bit more of a sense of ownership of their learning environment. So yeah, that would be a good thing to do.
Absolutely. We got quite a few. I'm going to bring up a couple of comments here, Chris. So going back to another comment from Saha. Something related to the lesson. Let them brainstorm. I think we do that on lots of teacher training courses, don't we? We're sort of activating schemata. I think finding out what their interests are, as Taha mentions here, part of doing a needs analysis at the beginning of a course. But do we always find out what they're interested in and use it in the right way? Sorry, it's a question for you, Chris. I'm not going to have to answer.
Yeah, I think that it's important that we do that, and I think sometimes it might be possible for us as teachers. We're all really busy. There are so many pressures on us, sort of in terms of our time. There are things that we need to fit into our classes, and I think it's possible sometimes that we may do a needs analysis at the beginning of the term or course and think, okay, that's done now. I've asked everyone and I've looked interested, and maybe not go back to it as much as we could, or just use that as a sort of one-time data collection point, where I think it can be way more helpful if, rather than learning about our learners as just being a one-time thing, if it's something that we consistently do sort of as we go through a course. So going back to Kiara and Cal's comments about observing learners during while they're engaged in learning activities in the classroom, maybe while they're talking about things, and just noting what it is that they're interested in, as well as their sort of language use. I think that can sort of go towards building much more of a sort of a fuller picture of individual learners as well as the class profile, which can be really helpful.
Well, thanks for that, Chris. I'd like to get your thoughts actually, because obviously I brought up competitions earlier. Tolly comments here about offering prizes and points. It's quite controversial, this, isn't it? I know a lot of teachers do it and a lot don't. I see no harm in doing it, but obviously we don't want our learners to get to that point where they're only doing things for points and prizes.
I entirely agree, Marcus. Yeah, I think that sometimes using competition and sort of like little rewards can be, it can provide a useful nudge if it gets people sort of engaged in and sort of doing useful classroom learning activities. Then yeah, that can be a good thing. However, exactly as you said, Marcus, I think if that becomes people's sole reason for doing it, then it can become counterproductive, because when those perceived rewards are not there, then they might just not do it. I think the topic of broader rewards as well is, I think that might be a useful thing for us to talk about. Perhaps teachers, perhaps people viewing this session could tell us in the comments, if you do reward learners in your class, what rewards do you give them? How do you reward them? Because I think I've seen some comments from some participants saying they might actually buy their students things. Now that's not something that I would do myself. I think there's many ways that we can sort of reward positive behavior in the classroom without having to put our sort of hands into our pockets. For example, you could let learners choose a song that everyone gets to listen to at the end of a lesson. That's something that could be quite useful for everyone to do, because it might expose them to some useful language sort of within the song. But it's, you know, I think that could be quite a positive way of rewarding behavior without teachers having to go out and buy stuff, and also without learners expecting that and only making an effort with sort of those, you know, material rewards in mind.
Absolutely. I've got a few responses coming in from teachers watching already, so thank you, and do keep them coming. Fatima actually raises an interesting point here that very much similar to my students, actually. I mean, they like nothing more than good marks. That is probably the best reward, but obviously if they are preparing for an exam, you know, if they're doing an exam preparation course, then, you know, their motivations would be to get the marks for themselves in order to get that pass to, you know, go on to university or whatever. Is there a way, Chris? Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, not at all, Marcus. I the thing that sort of really sort of caught my ear there was sort of talking about learners being motivated by marks, and that is a really powerful motivation for many learners in different contexts, sometimes more, in others a little bit less. But I think that there's been some research that shows that in cases where learners they receive a mark, whether it's a letter or a score out of 10, and some written feedback, if they get a mark as well as the feedback, they don't really read the feedback very well, or they don't pay that much attention to it. Whereas if there is sort of no scoring feedback, so maybe on an assignment, and somebody isn't immediately given a number, but they get given some written feedback about their performance, how they did, what they might be able to do in future to sort of push their performance up to the next level. If there's no score or sort of number attached to it, then they are more likely to pay attention to those comments and feedback. So I think that's something that I might nudge teachers towards. I mean, I understand in many situations it's necessary to give a score, and you'll be expected by your organisation to do that. So you could still give it, but you could delay it and maybe give that after the comments. A really nice way of doing it might be to sort of get them to self-evaluate. You could then possibly sort of give them some of your own comments, and then get them to score themselves and sort of check that against yours afterwards, because that will sort of help develop a little bit more maybe learner independence, a bit more learner autonomy as they become increasingly self-aware of their own performance and what good performance looks like. And that's obviously a very, very motivating thing, if learners can sort of measure and become aware of their own progress.
Absolutely. Great tip there. Thanks, Chris, for that. Just a few last ones to pick out, resonating really with our with the teachers who are watching. Paula says, I use their favorite videos and songs as a reward. I think you mentioned that earlier. Of course, if it's related, fantastic. Doa, rewarding learners by letting them choose. Again, something that you brought up just now, Chris. And something that I've been guilty of in the past, giving sweets.
Really, I'd like to be in your class, please, Marcus. Tell me where I can sign up.
But then it's worked both ways, to be honest. When we've got a test coming up, I found that some students often bring teacher a cup of coffee, for example.
Oh, really? Okay.
I'm admitting to nothing. Okay, let's do a quick recap to anyone who is just joining us now. Thank you for joining us. If you are just tuning in, we're talking about how to motivate our learners. If you find this video useful, or if you think your colleagues might find it useful, do share it with them. We're talking about motivation as part of week 1 of our course, How to Motivate Learners. And with me, we have the course tutor, Chris Thorne. So Chris, for those teachers who are just joining us, perhaps watching this live stream, who haven't joined the course yet, can they join it?
Marcus, they can join it. Indeed. I think, as you said, we're getting towards the end of the first week. It's a month-long course. So it runs until the 19th of October. There are a total of 4 modules that will be opening up over the duration of the course. So while they appear at various points during the course, there's no sort of deadline for each one other than the end of the course. So if you haven't signed up yet, don't worry about it. You can do that now, and you can work away sort of when you have time and when that fits into your schedule. So it's a 12-hour course overall. So that breaks down to approximately 3 hours a week. So if you need to do a little bit of catching up, I hope that would be possible for you. If you'd like to know what the course is actually about, it's motivation. It should develop your understanding of what motivation is, the things that affect it, recognizing what it is to be a motivational teacher, helping you develop a motivating learning environment, and creating useful learning activities for use within your classroom. So as well as there being a number of online modules, there are a few live events like this one. But I think the real value in this course isn't so much for the sort of self-study modules, which have got some really, really good ideas and good stuff in there. But I think the real value of it is taking those ideas, playing around with them, experimenting with them sort of in your classroom, whether that's a physical or virtual space, and then sharing your reflections and experiences and questions in the Facebook group, where you can sort of get the benefit of support from, well, I think nearly 3,000 other teachers from across the world. So if you haven't signed up yet, this is a very long-winded way of saying that you really should sign up for it right now, and it's not too late.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Chris. And I can see we've actually got quite a few comments from, for example, Tolly asking, how can I join the course? Saha, how to apply? Well, there should be, if I remember to do it correctly, in the link in the description of this video, there should be a link that will take you to the course information page where you can sign up and enroll on the course. If you do find a little bit problematic logging on using your device that you're currently on, mobile or desktop, just do go to the Teaching English Facebook page. We've got several posts there, all with a link to the course. Alternatively, go to the Teaching English website. Thank you so much for that, Chris. So let's say participants enroll in the course and they complete everything successfully. Is there a certificate? I know a lot of people have been asking about that.
Yeah, there's a certificate. So yeah, if you complete all the learning activities, again, you don't need to do them week by week by week. I'd encourage you to do so. It's generally better practice to study little and often and sort of slowly introduce these ideas within your classroom. But so long as you get everything done, the four online modules by the end of the course, the 19th of October, then you will get yourself a nice shiny British Council certificate.
Chris. Well, thank you very much. It's got a few comments and questions actually from our live audience, if we don't mind, Chris.
Yeah.
On the topic actually. So this one I brought up earlier. Let me just quickly find it. Okay. Right, this one from King Fatur. How to manage and motivate, say, young learners during the lesson, bearing in mind that it's one-to-one. Now, I know, obviously, we're talking about teachers generally have a class, a large class in some cases, but we do have some teachers in the audience now watching who may be supplementing one of those classes or doing some one-to-one classes as a kind of catch-up lesson. What would your tips be on motivating sort of one-to-one young learner, Chris? And teachers watching, if you have any tips, do drop them in the comments below.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to read everyone else's suggestions. Some quick things that come to mind is that in some ways, a one-to-one class is a really good opportunity because you can totally customize this course towards the needs of an individual learner. I think variety can be a well, it's a really, really important thing. You can have variety in terms of the materials you use. I'd normally say you can have variety in terms of interaction patterns. Now, if that's a one-to-one lesson, that might be a little bit more challenging. However, depending on the resources that you have available to you and that learner has, you might be able to make use of technology. So if they have a smartphone with a voice recorder or a camera with a video recorder, then that could be a really, really nice way of getting them to record their own language use, whether that's sort of spoken. Obviously, they can also sort of capture written, what they're writing as well. But I think if they're using video to sort of capture what they're saying, then that can be sort of looked back on in the future to sort of provide a nice sense of progress. There's also lots of stuff you can do with sort of video editing software where somebody could sort of cut and paste and sort of make up their own conversation where they're playing the various parts in it. That's something that I know, or I found students to find really, really motivating as well. Find out what your students are into. I, I found that working with young learners of all ages, using sort of comic strips as a medium for sort of producing and sharing language can sometimes be really, really effective. It provides natural product, something they can look back on in future and think, yeah, I made that. It provides opportunities for humor, for creativity, for them to do some silly, funny stuff. The sort of the visual side of it really reinforces and puts a real focus on meaning, not just sort of churning out and sort of regurgitating language in very sort of form focused activities. So I think my advice would be to try and get them producing things, creating things as much as possible. If it's possible to do that as a series of sort of individual projects, that could be quite a successful way of approaching it. But I'd love to hear some of the viewers' suggestions as well, Marcus.
Actually, I'm looking through the comments right now, so I'll try and dig out some of the suggestions before we leave it. But Samira's question here has actually got me reminiscing of previous teaching jobs, and we're talking about often the carrot and the stick. You know, when it comes to motivation, what are your thoughts on discipline, Chris? Is that an appropriate tool we could use to motivate? Does it work in your experience?
Well, sorry, using sort of punishments and rewards.
Yes, I'm not sure if I've sort of overly summarized Samira's question there, but when we try to motivate our learners, is using some kind of I don't know, discipline like rules or a threat. Let's say if you don't participate, there'll be some extra homework. Would that work in motivating our learners?
Okay, I think in like the example you just gave, you need to do this, or there'll be extra homework. In the very immediate short term, maybe it might encourage them to do that thing or stop doing that thing that you want them to start or stop doing. But I think the longer term impact of that is that it tells students that homework is an undesirable thing. Homework is bad and it is a punishment, and you're being given it because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I think that's quite an unhelpful notion to bring into the classroom. So I would steer away from that. I think positive reinforcement is really, really helpful, and I'd put more of an onus on that. Having said that, I think that there needs to be a very, very sort of clearly communicated set and sequence of sanctions of things that will happen in your classroom if expectations are not met. I think it's important that learners know what these are. They should know what they can expect of you, as well as you letting them know what you expect of them. I mean, this session is very much about motivation, and I think a positive way of doing that, without it being too much about rules and punishments, is maybe your starting point being a class contract. So rather than imposing rules upon your learners, involve them in the process and try and negotiate with them. If you haven't done this before, you might be surprised at just how reasonable learners are, and in some cases, how harsh on themselves they might be. They might introduce rules and will suggest rules that might go a little bit further than you would have suggested. So I think I would suggest that as a starting point. Yeah. I think that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. But there's I think the last comment to bring up here from Fatin, and I love this idea as well. You know, we are tapping into that inner motivation, aren't we? That's what we want. We want it to be meaningful. We want it to be genuine, to come from the heart.
Indeed, Marcus. And yeah, sorry, just to finish off my last sort of point. I trailed off a little bit there, as I do. You probably noticed, but I think a really big thing which kind of cuts across everything we've discussed today, is that I think it's important to create a very positive, safe learning environment in which learners feel that they're taking the lead, that they're active participants in the learning process. They shouldn't feel that they're very, very passive and they come to their class and teaching and learning is something that's done to them by their teacher, something that they're subject to. So I think anything that we can do to make learners feel in control and make them feel empowered, that's got to be a positive thing. So really trying to sort of hand over control, give people choices, and if you can, ask before you tell.
I have nothing to say. Yes, absolutely, Chris. I mean, those are some fantastic tips. Teachers watching, if you would like to learn more from Chris, How to Motivate Learners is still open for enrollment. You can find details by clicking the link in the description of this video, or go to the Teaching English Facebook page. You can find plenty of information there, along with the section of the website. So go to teachingenglish.org.uk/training. Hope I got that right. Thank you to Paul, who is monitoring some of the comments and who has been sending lots of you the link to the course directly. So I'm going to jump on to the comments now. Chris, thank you so much for helping us out, and I'll leave you get back to the course now. And teachers watching, we'll see you hopefully on the course.